Hello and welcome. This is episode 1 of looking at different Wikipedia pages. I've never looked at this Wikipedia page before and I don't know anything about it. Get comfy, as today we're going to be learning about the 1947 BCAA Avro-Lancasterian Stardust accident. I've got a list of about 500 different Wikipedia pages to go through, and I'm going to go through them one by one. If you've got any interesting pages you want me to look at, please leave them in the comments. It could be anything that's scary, history related, just interesting, gory, fascinating. I don't mind, whatever it is. This is going to be an ongoing series, so get yourself comfy and let's learn about this. So the year is 1947. 2 years after World War II has ended. BCAA Avro-Lancasterian Stardust accident. On August 2nd, 1947, Stardust, a British South American Airways, okay, so that's the BCAA, Avro-Lancasterian airliner on a flight from Buenos Aires, Argentina, to Santiago, Chile, crashed in Mount Tupungato, even, in the Argentine Andes. An extensive search operation failed to locate the wreckage. Despite covering the area of the crash site, the fate of the aircraft and its occupants remains unknown for over 50 years, giving rise to various conspiracy theories about its disappearance. In the late 1990s, pieces of wreckage from the missing aircraft began to emerge from the glacial ice. Oh my gosh, that's actually crazy. It is now believed that the crew became confused as to their exact location while flying at high altitudes through the then poorly understood jet stream. What is that? Fast flowing narrow air current in the atmosphere. Anyone in the comments let me know, explain that. Mistakenly believing that they had already cleared the mountaintops, they started their descent when they were in fact still behind cloud-covered peaks. Stardust crashed into Mount Tupungato, killing all aboard and burying itself in snow and ice. The last word in Stardust's final Morse code transmission to Santiago Airport, STENDEC, was received by the airport control tower 4 times before its planned landing, and repeated twice. It has never been satisfactorily explained. Okay, so essentially it's a small aircraft with 11 occupants in 1947 that crashed and everyone died. And the mystery behind it is the STENDEC, and I believe that's why it's a famous aircraft incident. It must have been so hard back then to locate aircraft that went missing. I don't reckon there was the same level of communication, and obviously radar was around, but I don't know if it would have been on a small plane like this. I don't know. The accident aircraft, an Avro 691 Lancasterian 3, was built as constructor's number 1280 for the Argentine Ministry of Supply to carry 13 passengers, and first flew on 27th of November 1945. Its certificate of airworthiness, C of A, number 7282, was issued on 1st Jan 1946. It was delivered to BCAA on 12 January 1946, was registered on 16th Jan, and given the individual aircraft name Stardust. Stardust carried 6 passengers and crew of 5 on its final flight. The captain, Reginald Cook, was an experienced former RAF pilot in the combat experience during the Second World War, as were his first officer, Norman Hilton Cook, and second officer, Donald Chechlin, DFS. Cook had been awarded the Distinguished Service Order and Distinguished Flying Cross. The radio operator Dennis Harmer also had a record of wartime as well as civilian service. Irish Evans, who had previously served in the Women Royal Naval Service. Basically, so they were cracked pilots. To survive the RAF in World War II, you're going to be one of the best pilots in the world at the time. And there's 2 of them, as well as someone with a Distinguished Service Order. It's a cracked pilot. It's that actually adds to it and makes it more confusing as why they crashed. As you think if you could survive fighting Messerschmitts, you know, you might be able to survive flying over Argentina. Who knows? Stardust's last flight was the final leg of BCAA flight CS-59, which had started in London on an Avro York. Named Star Mist on 29th July 1947, landed in Buenos Aires on 1st of August. The passengers were 1 woman and 5 men in Palestine, Swiss, German and British nationality. One was a British diplomat, courier, a king's messenger. So it had important things on it. Maybe that's why it crashed. Who knows? Maybe it was taken down. Conspiracy. Any conspiracies? Martin Limert, a German, and there's a German, joked, was the only passenger known for certainty to have initially boarded Star Mist in London before changing aircraft in Buenos Aires to continue on to Santiago with other passengers. Disappearance. Stardust left Buenos Aires on 1:46 p.m. on 2nd August. This leg of the flight was apparently uneventful until the radio operator Harmer sent a routine message in Morse code to the airport in Santiago at 5:41 p.m. announcing an expected arrival of 5:45 p.m. However, Stardust never arrived. No more radio transmissions were received by the airport, and intensive efforts by both Chilean and Argentine search teams, as well as by other BCAA pilots, failed to uncover any trace of the aircraft or of the other people on board. The head of BCAA Air Vice Marshal Don Bennett personally directed an unsuccessful 5-day search. A reporter by an amateur radio operator who claimed to have received a faint SOS signal from Stardust initially raised hopes that there might have been survivors, but all subsequent attempts over the years to find the vanished aircraft failed. In the absence of any hard evidence, numerous theories arose, including rumours of sabotage, compounded by the later disappearance of 2 other aircraft also belonging to the BCAA. What the hell? Speculation that Stardust must have also been blown up to destroy diplomatic documents being carried by the King's Messenger, I called it, or even the suggestion that Stardust had been taken by a UFO. An idea fueled by unresolved questions about flight. Okay, sure. Who actually thinks that? BBC? Say no more. Discovery of wreckage and reconstruction of the crash. In 1998, 2 Argentine mountaineers climbing Mount Tupungato, about 60 miles southwest of Mendoza and about 50 miles east of Santiago found the wreckage of a Rolls-Royce Merlin aircraft engine, which I believe was super common engines at the time, used in Spitfires, along with twisted pieces of metal and shreds of clothing, and the Tupungato Glacier at an elevation of 15,000 feet. In 2000, the Argentine Army expedition found additional wreckage, including a propeller and wheels, one of which had an intact and inflated tyre, even after 50 years, and noted that the wreckage, my tyres can't even do that, for a year, and noted that the wreckage was well localized, a fact which pointed to a head-on impact with the ground, and which also ruled out a mid-air explosion, so unlikely to be a UFO. Or someone with a bomb on board. Human remains were also recovered, including 3 torsos, a foot, an ankle, and a manicured hand. By 2002, the bodies of 5 of the 8 British victims had been identified through DNA testing. A recovered propeller showed that the engine had been running at near cruising speed at the time of the impact. Additionally, the condition of the wheels proved that the undercarriage was still retracted, suggesting controlled flight into terrain rather than the attempted emergency landing. So it was just accidentally flown into the ground. During the final portion of Stardust flight, a heavy cloud would have blocked visibility of the ground. It was therefore been suggested that, in the absence of visual sightings of the ground due to the clouds, a navigational error could have been made as the aircraft flew through the jet stream. a phenomenon not well understood in 1947, in which high-altitude winds can blow at high speeds in directions different from those of winds observed at ground level. If the airliner, which had to cross the Andes mountain range at 24,000 feet, had entered the jet stream zone, which in this area normally blows from the west and southwest, resulting in the aircraft encountering headwind, this would have significantly decreased the aircraft's ground speed. Mistakenly assuming their ground speed to be faster than it really was, the crew might have deducted that they had already safely crossed the Andes. Because they thought they were going faster than they actually were, they thought they'd already crossed it, I see. And so commenced their descent to Santiago, whereas in fact they were still a considerable distance to the east-northwest and were approaching the cloud-enshrouded Tupuntango Glacier at a high speed. Some BCAA pilots, however, expressed skepticism at this theory, convinced that Cook would have not started his descent without a positive indication that he had crossed the mountains. They have suggested that strong winds may have brought down the craft in some other way. One of the pilots recalled that, "We have all been warned not to enter cloud over the mountains as the turbulence and icing pose too great a threat." A set of events similar to those that doomed Stardust also caused the crash of the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 in 1972, years later, depicted in the film Alive, although there were survivors from the crash because it involved a glancing blow to a mountainside rather than a head-on collision. Stardust is likely to have flown into a near-vertical snowfield near the top of the glacier, causing an avalanche that buried the wreckage within seconds and concealed it from searchers. As the compressed snow turned to ice, the wreckage would have been incorporated into the body of the glacier, with fragments emerging many years later and much further down the mountain. Between 1998 and 2000, about 10% of the total expected wreckage emerged from the glacier, prompting several re-examinations of the accident. More debris is expected to emerge in future, not only as a result of normal glacial motion, but also as the glacier melts, so they've not even found it yet, even though in 2000 they knew it was there, but 25 years later they still don't have all of the aircraft. What? A 2000 Argentine Air Force investigation cleared Cook of any blame, concluded that the crash had resulted from a heavy snowstorm and very cloudy weather, as a result of which the crew were unable to correct their positioning. Yeah, I'd be super surprised if it was the pilot's fault, seeing as he was a former RAF pilot in World War II. The last Morse code message sent by Stardust was ETA Santiago, 1745 hours STENDEC. The Chilean Air Force radio operator at Santiago Airport described his transmission as coming in loud and clear, but very fast. As he did not recognize the last word, he requested clarification and heard STENDEC repeated twice in succession before contact with the aircraft was lost. This word has not been definitively explained and has given rise to much speculation. The staff of the BBC television series Horizon, which presented an episode in 2000 on the Stardust disappearance, received hundreds of messages from viewers proposing explanations of STENDEC. These included suggestions that the radio operator, possibly suffering from hypoxia, inadequate oxygen because of the altitude I assume, had scrambled the word descent, of which STENDEC is an anagram. Seems very plausible. That STENDEC, but to accidentally spell descent as STENDEC, how many times? Repeated twice, so he sent it 3 times. He misspelled descent as exactly STENDEC. That I don't know if I'm buying that, because hypoxia, he's going to be affected by the altitude, right? So he's accidentally spelling descent wrong. Okay, fair. But to accidentally spell descent wrong 3 times and say STENDEC instead, I don't know. I feel like the altitude you might spell descent wrong, but are you going to write the same wrong, spell it wrong 3 times? I don't know. It's the same way. Do you know what I'm saying? That STENDEC may have been the initials of some obscure phrase, or that the airport radio operator had misheard the Morse code transmission, despite it reportedly having been repeated multiple times. The Horizon staff concluded, with the possible exception of some misunderstanding based on Morse code, none of these proposed solutions were plausible. Agreed. Agreed. The simplest explanation put forward to date is that spacing of the rapidly sent message was misheard or sloppily sent. In Morse code, determining accurate spacing between characters is vital to properly interpret the message. STENDEC uses exactly the same dot-dash sequences as STI-AR, STI being the ICAO 4-letter code for Los Aquiles Airport in Santiago, AR being the Morse abbreviation for over. Alternatively, the Morse code spelling for STENDEC is one character, often spelling verb, the call sign for the airport. Yeah, this is probably more plausible. I don't think there's any foul play or anything weird, because you got to send STENDEC 3 times. Surely he's sending SOS at that point if there is something going wrong, especially if STENDEC doesn't actually stand for anything. It's not a call sign. I don't know how common it was to misspell Morse code back then, because you'd think to misspell the wrong thing 3 times in a row, like, that's not very professional. That's crazy. And if you could make the argument that they misspelled it because they were like crashing or it was going crazy, but then why would he be saying STENDEC when it doesn't actually stand for anything? Surely he'd start sending someone else. Interesting. I don't know why they sent STENDEC. What do you think? Below, please let me know. Obviously very sad crash. Yeah, happens when you're flying over the Andes, I guess. Especially in such a small plane. That's super dangerous to go at that altitude. I don't think there's anything particularly weird at STENDEC. I can't explain it, but I don't think it's anything too interesting. I don't think it was the pilot at fault. But yeah, this was a pretty good Wikipedia article, pretty interesting. I hope you enjoyed watching. Episode 2 will be on the way soon. If you've got anything you would like to comment, any Wikipedia articles you'd like me to look at, let me know. This has been the 1947 BCAA Avro Lancasterian Stardust accident. Thanks for watching. Bye.